Paul Maynard, elected in 2010 as a Conservative MP for Blackpool and Cleveleys. Thanks for coming in today. Really looking forward to getting to know you better. You have cerebral palsy. Tell me what happened to you at birth.
Basically at birth, the umbilical cord got wrapped around my neck. I got starved of oxygen. It led to a degree of brain damage and I had cerebral palsy. Of course, a very broad spectrum, and I know I'm at the milder end, but nonetheless, it does affect some of my motor skills, some of my coordination. When I get tired, I have a tendency to trip up, so it's not really great.
How did it impact your childhood?
I suppose in the most obvious way, I started out at a nursery unit in a special school, which I don't think any other MP has done, certainly, but I was able to transfer to mainstream fairly early on. So I was fortunate at school. There was no real bullying at all, and maybe the odd name or two, but everyone was actually very supportive of me. Only when I went into politics, it got a bit more challenging, perhaps. So yeah, my childhood was fairly normal, I would argue.
Only when you got into politics that it became more challenging?
Yes.
In terms of prejudice?
I think that's when people started to notice the difference, when expectations were either lower or higher, or people started to judge you on having a disability. They began to put a label around your neck, and that, I think, meant some of the challenges came to the fore then. You were judged much more on having a disability, I felt.
Who by?
Oh, participants, you know, party members, opposition members, you name it. You were seen through that lens a bit more. So I knew I then had to be better than the best. I had to up my game. I had to, you know, I couldn't afford to speak from notes. I had to do I made sure I did my maiden speech, for example, without notes, because I knew that I had to prove myself. And maybe that's what motivates me even now, after 13 years in this place. I still feel I'm having to prove myself and the reason I'm there, and that I can be a good quality MP and works hard on behalf of my constituents.
And just going to your maiden speech, actually, before I do this, knowing you in Parliament, I must say, actually, that you always exuded total confidence and strength.
But you can't show weakness.
And you never showed weakness. I remember exchanges with you, actually. You don't remember them, but I remember a particular exchange where I thought, oh, I better not mess with him. But that's all about not showing weakness and being at your best. Every day, never dropping a ball because you don't think society or the system allows you to.
Yeah, or my colleagues. You need that respect in Parliament, and that's why I've got to make sure I always put in that extra effort. If you're going to do it better than the rest.
Really impressive. So you said in your maiden speech, which you delivered without notes, that you hope the very fact that you were there, standing on those green benches, representing your constituents, that you would change attitudes. Have you?
I think I have, to a certain extent. I think that's partly because Parliament itself has become more diverse, with more people with a different range of characteristics, that Parliament itself has seen to have changed. Obviously, you still get the occasional comment or the occasional unkindness, but I think by and large, I've been able to contribute not just on issues around cerebral palsy and disability, but a wider range of issues. I was always concerned I might get pigeonholed as an MP. Oh, he's a disabled one, he'll only talk about this. But I made a point about talking about what issues I find in my own constituency. So in a sense, you're proving you can do the job by not talking about it. Although I do try and make sure that I do talk about it as well, because of course it matters to me.
You said that you have encountered prejudice while doing your job from the system, from colleagues, from opposition members. There are some diversity courses which exist, provided by the parliamentary authorities to ensure that unconscious bias or even conscious bias doesn't exist. Are they a good thing? Do you subscribe?
I don't think they do any harm, but I'm not sure that they're a cure for anything. It's down to individuals and how they want to behave and how they want to perceive you. You can't reach into someone's brain and flick a switch. It's like, you know, challenging unconscious bias is not something that a course can necessarily change. It can help people's perception, but I think it's my behaviour, it's how I deal with things, it's how I present myself that changes attitudes as much as any course where people flick through a few slides on the screen can change.
Every time, this is a quote from yourself, every time I stand up in this place, those green benches, I get an email saying, why were you drunk before you appeared in the House of Commons chamber?
I think that's a misunderstanding of cerebral palsy because it affected my voice box, particularly strangulating my voice. What I hear inside me sounds perfectly comprehensible. I watch myself on TV, I'm absolutely horrified. So I know I've got to be a little clearer with my diction and how I speak. But I mean, I was coming to Westminster this week, yesterday morning, walking through the streets of Preston on the way to the station, two blokes standing on the street laughing at me and pointing. You know, it still goes on to this day because people simply don't understand. It's part ignorance, it's part strange jealousy in some way. How dare he do this job when I could do it better sort of attitude. But it still goes on. But you know that you just have to carry on, you know, whatever.
And for anybody who has cerebral palsy, I don't know if you would mind me saying, or another visible disability, correct me if you think any of my language is wrong, who thinks, is it for me? Is Parliament for me? What's your words of advice to them?
Well, I always get a little concerned when people tell me that I'm a role model for them, because I'm not a role model for anyone. But I do think that, you know, I want everyone to feel that they can play a part in public life, whatever political party they're in or they support. Equally, I do tell lots of people, don't assume a career in politics is the right path to go down. Make sure you have several arrows, you know, several bows to your arrow, that you've got alternatives, because politics is not really a career, it's a form of public service that can end at any moment. So, yeah.
How do we break down the misunderstandings about cerebral palsy? Is there campaigning work that you are doing that's going on now?
I mean, I co-chair the all-party group with Mary Kelly Foy. We do a lot of work with the new charities set up called Action CP, doing reports not just on diagnosis, but on early years life, transitions from school to university and all that sort of thing. So we can start to challenge. But I think because cerebral palsy is such a broad spectrum of a condition, it can go from me to those who have, you know, no control over their limbs at all, for example. It's very hard to narrow it down and say, we've changed attitudes to cerebral palsy. I know people with ascertained cerebral palsy who have PhDs in astrophysics, yet can't express themselves without a computer. It's incredibly impressive what they're able to achieve. So I think challenging perceptions is all about what you can achieve and showing what you've done in life. That's what changes perceptions, in my view.
Could you encourage, or do you feel you have a role to encourage more disabled people to enter Parliament?
I hope so. And I always look to explain to people the challenges I face, but everyone's challenges are going to be different. I'm not in a wheelchair. But the Palace of Westminster, as you will know, is a hopelessly inaccessible place for those in a wheelchair to navigate around. So my challenges are not every person with a disability's challenges. But, you know, the House authorities are always superb at trying to work around and provide support, whatever those challenges are to individuals.
Is there one thing that you'd say, if only Parliament did this, that would make my life easier? Is there such a thing?
As I said, I think it differs to each and every individual, and luckily, I can function, as it were. I can get around. Yeah. I can read. All those sorts of things. So I don't have one single obstacle that needs to be overcome. But I recognise many others do, and I know Parliament always tries, and Mr. Speaker always tries to make sure they can participate fully.
Let's do a bit of politics. I read a piece where you were described as a Rishi Sunak superfan.
Yes.
Do you accept the label?
Absolutely, and I still am.
For those colleagues, and this happens in all parties, you know, there are superfans of leaders, there are sceptics, there's ambivalence. Anyone who's not a superfan, tell them why they should be a Rishi superfan.
I think we're speaking shortly after the local elections, where we haven't seen the greatest performance from our party. I think I would say to those who are doubters, perhaps, that now is not the time for the party to fall into infighting. We're demonstrating our competence as a government. No one can doubt the Prime Minister is a good man trying to do his best in a difficult job. No one would ever suggest otherwise, in my view. That the party has to focus on the future. Yes, I think we need to see more vision, more of a positive reason to vote Conservative. That's why I want those who are perhaps more fond of previous regimes to feel they can play a role. I have some sympathy for some of their ideological positions. You know, I want to see a different approach to house building, but it has to be one that creates consensus rather than division, trying to prove a point. So give us your ideas, work within the mainstream of the party, and then I think we can deliver a much more powerful vision for the future.
You once said, I see myself on the right of the party. I'm not a one nation wet lettuce. What's a one nation wet lettuce?
So I think there may be some who have considered themselves on the left of the party who think that actually anything radical, anything reformist, anything too changey is a bit too crunchy for them. And a wet lettuce doesn't like crunchiness.
Final question. You were a minister. You were a minister for a number of years.
Yep.
You were a transport minister. How was the civil service? I don't think they needed to make any allowances for you, but you were different from most other ministers. Was that an asset, or did there need to be some work done around how the civil service operates?
I think they saw me through fresh eyes. I'm not sure they quite knew what they had to anticipate. They were quite nervous at first. As, do we need to do this? Oh, Minister, can you take the stairs? Minister, can you do this? I had to say, stop calling me Minister. It really unnerves me. So I think at the end of the day, my natural enthusiasm for the brief, the style of working, to me it was a team. You collaborated, you did all that sort of thing that, ended up many of the officials I work with remain some of my best friends that I see on a regular basis. So I consider that a success in terms of working with the civil service. Not every minister can probably say that.
Paul Maynard, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.